So just a quick introduction to the Freethinker Institute, which is the not-for-profit, which this event is created through. We want to create a warm, open-minded community that helps people create transformational, professional, and personal growth and development with an end goal of maximizing happiness and minimizing harm. I figure more happiness and less harm is a good thing. And if anyone can find a reason why it's not, let me know. We're always open to feedback. That's part of the 5 intentions, is having an open mind towards new ideas, which are the 5 intentions are the values of the Freethinker Institute, which you can find on our website, which is here. And then we really want to help people, live better, happier lives. And so we have an online community, which I'll post the link to, and I'll post the information about the organization in the Discord chat, or in the Discord chat, the Zoom chat. Tonight I'm going to let Himanshu introduce his subject, because he's the best at doing that. And so I'm going to pass it over to Himanshu for tonight's session. And I want to thank Himanshu for speaking tonight. And Himanshu, do you want to give an introduction to your topic for tonight?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Garrett. So I'm Himanshu Bharadwaj. I'm a designer by profession, and happiness has been a lifelong seeking adventure for me. I believe we can make every life experience joyful, and we can seek a higher purpose in life. So I look forward to presenting some ideas on happiness in this session. So, back when I was growing up in India, in my high school, I used to wonder during my mathematics classes if there is an equation for happiness in life. And, I was solving complex equations, and I used to wonder, life equation may also have a lot of variables. And the reason why we cannot solve life's problem is because these variables and the value of these variables, nature of these variables are unknown. To us, these variables may look constant and real, and so we focus on them instead of happiness, because happiness seems abstract to us. I once traveled in a small boat with my father and saw water coming into the boat as we were rowing. So my father told me that boats don't sink because of the water around it. They sink because of the water that seeps through it. So it taught me not to let what's happening around you get inside you and weigh you down to be happy. So as I, grew up, I wandered around in the Himalayan regions, stayed in monastery for some time, and I tried to understand what is the meaning and purpose of our life. I learned that as we grow in our life, our understanding starts with external objects that are not responsible for our happiness. Then happiness to us is a state of mind. As we mature more, we begin to understand that happiness is a property of your own self. Our own self is reflected by the mind and superimposed on the object and attributed to the object. So this is some Eastern philosophy that had a deeper impact on me. And what I also understood that, unfortunately, we credit the object and not go deeper. But the object is essentially my being. So let us explore this a little further as we go along in this conversation today. So I came to this country and I saw life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence. And I felt, from my past, life is unpredictable. Liberty is controlled by laws and do's and don'ts. But pursuit of happiness sounded interesting. We have equal rights to pursue it. So over the years, I have settled on these stages of happiness, starting with happiness through the senses that we all understand, happiness from thoughts, which is a much higher pedestal, happiness from intellect, much higher than that, happiness from service to others, and then happiness from meditation and bliss. So this is where I am today. And let us now explore, the subject of happiness. And as I entered my workforce and I saw, everybody working from Monday to Friday and then waiting for the weekend to come, and they have plans for the weekend, it felt to me that the happy days are Saturday and Sunday, and Monday to Friday is more like a chore that you have to just keep doing. And those are the stressful days of our life. As I dug in, I saw, I saw a cartoon in New Yorker magazine where there was this slide, kids slide, and there were 7 steps to go to the slide, and those 7 steps were Monday to Friday, and the slide was actually Saturday and Sunday. 52% of US workforce are burnt out. We all know our jobs have become very stressful and burnt. There are stats that show that 2.6% more likely are these employees seeking another job, or 63% are more likely to have a sick day. So these are some stats that I dug up recently. And when we face a burnout, it takes about 5 years to get out of it. There is research that says, happy people live healthier and longer. And there is some recent research that says happy employees show up for work 16 days more in the year. As I started managing people in my career, I read about how I should build teams of people that are more productive. And I came across some research that said, happy people are more collegial. People like to team up with such people at work. Happy teams outperform in the long run. So when all this is in front of us, why are employers, corporations not paying enough attention to it? And those are some questions I'm still grappling with, and I would love to hear some opinion from all of you at the end of this presentation. We are living in the most developed nation in the world. And that got me thinking, if wealth is the secret to happiness, then rich should be dancing on the street. But what we see are poor kids, poor people dancing on the street more than the rich people. If power ensures security, then the government officials and the ruling class should be walking unguarded. But those who live simply sleep soundly, and people are people without power. Thirdly, if beauty and fame bring ideal relationships, then celebrities should be the best in relationships and marriages. But we have seen how Hollywood is and how how long celebrity marriages last. So then the question is everybody pursuing happiness? And I came across a research from a professor in University of North Carolina, Barbara Fredrickson, and she has a theory called broaden and build theory. And according to her, if you are happy in the long run, you will have more tools in your toolkit, and it will broaden your approach in life. When we are negative, we are narrow in our focus. When we are positive, we are more likely to appreciate things. If you look at some fMRI images of happy and stressed brain, and these are pretty commonly available, there are a lot of articles written and people have taken those images. You see that happy brains are lit up all around. There is more oxygen flowing in all parts of the brain. There are more neural connections. The frontal cortex has more activity, the prefrontal cortex. In unhappy brain, only the limbic brain seems to be active. And we know limbic brain is known for the black and white decisions, the fight and flee decisions. So what that means is when we are happy, we can draw from all our experiences and come to a better decision. So if the job involves subtle decisions in teams, convincing other people, if we are in the creative profession where we have to think of new ideas, only happy people would succeed. So then it's pretty obvious that we need more activity in the prefrontal cortex, and we need more neural connections across the entire brain. How do we do it? And this has been a journey for me, trying to figure out, both for my own professional work, for my teams, for creating new products and services that I do in my profession, and also for my own personal life. So before we get into happiness, let's explore a little bit about unhappiness. And I think unhappiness is also important in life, because unhappiness comes to us without any effort. Unhappiness helps us learn and appreciate happiness. If we are not unhappy, we will not know the value of happiness. And moreover, unhappiness is the beginning of the effort to seek happiness. Every effort in life is in pursuit of happiness. And what the Eastern philosophy talks about is, by attaching to the actions of our effort and detaching from the results of our action, we can be happy. But we do the other way around. We attach ourselves to the results of our happiness, and we forget that the happiness is a journey. The other part of this philosophy is that, life is a continuous journey of joys and sorrows. And what gives us happiness is the cause of sorrow when it ends. When the sorrow ends, the same sorrow becomes the cause of happiness. So both are important. So the greater the sorrow, the greater our experience of happiness would be, and vice versa. So it's like sun and moon, after every night, there will always be a day. And after every day, there will always be a night. So if we keep that in mind at all times, people will be less unhappy. There has been a philosopher called Osho. He's a little infamous, but he has this theory about, we all like unhappiness. And he says, man is an upside down being. He collects memories of suffering. And we show great interest in unhappiness as we discuss unhappiness with others. We like to talk about unhappiness, about our own troubles with other people, as if troubles are worth talking about. And, by dwelling in our troubles, we make them more substantial than they should be. By discussing unhappiness, unhappiness accumulates in our mind. And by dwelling on suffering, they only intensify. In return, they give birth to new sufferings. So we are the reason for giving birth to new sufferings by dwelling on our own unhappiness.
Hi, guys.
And if you see around, nobody really talks about happiness as much as they talk about unhappiness. If we don't collect happiness, we collect suffering. So then the question is, what exactly is happiness? Many people think excitement is happiness. They go to parties and dance. They think that is, exciting. And when we are excited, we are not really peaceful. And in my opinion, true happiness is based on peace. So when life energies are high, we feel happy. And depression is, having life energy at a lower level. On a basic level, maybe this is the definition. But yes, there is a distinction between pleasure and happiness, for sure. Everyone understands happiness, because we all go through it. We have lived that experience. But the problem with all of us is we are unable to maintain that happiness. If you look at a child is generally happy. He has a happy disposition. And someone has to make the child unhappy. As we grow up, we need somebody to make us happy. Despite all the scientific developments in the last 100 years, the happiness index has not really risen. And that is something to ponder, because the quality of life is much better than what it was 100 years ago. 100 years ago, the quality of life of kings or of rich people was much worse than the average person in a developed country today. But a lot of people go through depression. A lot of people are unhappy in this world, and we have paid a big price to create this happiness through technology and progress. And plants, animals, the whole planet has paid the price for it. It is something to think about. There is a Western viewpoint on happiness that I try to look at and try to compare it with the Eastern viewpoint. And according to Martin Seligman, who is the pioneer of positive psychology, happiness has 3 dimensions: the pleasant, the good, and the meaningful life. The Eastern viewpoint, on the other hand, talks about mind as unstable. The mind wanders and is hungry for unlimited knowledge, prosperity, and unlimited happiness. So the mind seeks satisfaction in the objects of the world, but is still unsatisfied. Turning the mind inwards satisfies the mind. There is another viewpoint that says we have been hypnotized all our life into believing that we are a limited being. And the whole process of Eastern philosophy, the Indian philosophy in particular, and the Buddhist philosophy takes, has roots in the Indian yoga philosophy, is all about dehypnotizing oneself from this weakness, thinking that we are a limited being. The process of becoming unlimited, expanding our consciousness, helps us understand that we are the spark of supreme reality, which is complete. So our potential and capabilities are limitless once we dehypnotize ourselves from this limitedness. So as we go through these 2 philosophies and the complexity of the life, of mind, body, consciousness, the question is, how do we become unlimited? If becoming unlimited is the answer to the problem, how do we become unlimited? And the philosophers of the East talk about this process being very simple. One of that process is just think about people who have achieved greatness. Meditate on those people who have achieved that greatness and merge your mind with them. By constantly thinking about these people, we draw their energies into us. Science talks about something called mirror neurons, that help us put in other people's shoes. This is the reason why we go to movies, and when we see a very emotional scene, we cry. We try to emulate some of those heroes in the movie. So mirror neurons are probably hint to us for to be loving, kind, and generous, and how to be happy. So just simply mirroring other people who are happy, who are great, who have achieved something great in life could be one way to become happy. We would ultimately become like them. You might have heard, successful people say, I have everything, I have power, I have a great career, I'm beautiful, I have lots of money in life, but I'm not really happy. I wonder why people say that. I think without inner fulfillment, life is unhappy, even if we have everything. Some people are so poor that money is the only thing they have. So then, what exactly is wealth? And I feel real wealth is having things money cannot buy. When many people come to wipe our tears, that is richness. So in a corporate world, we build relationships, but I feel those relationships are probably more selfish relationships. These are not true friendships. Even the appreciation sometimes seem hollow. So the goal for happiness, as the Western philosophers have talked about, is to find more meaningful relationships, to find more meaning in everything we do. So we have talked about happiness, but let us talk about why we want to be happy. Everyone has the same goal, in my opinion. Everything that we do is for happiness. There is nothing in this world that we don't do that is not for happiness. Even people who commit suicide do it because they feel that they'll get rid of their unhappiness, and they'll be happy if they get rid of that unhappiness state in life. There's actually a story of a lazy boy who was lying under a tree, and somebody with the MBA and PhD goes to him and asks him to study instead of wasting the time. So this boy asks, why should I study? So then, this wise guy says, if you study, you'll have a job. With job, you'll have money. With money, you'll have wife, kids, house, and ultimately you'll be happy. So the kid says, I'm happy even without doing work. I'm happy lying under the tree in the cool breeze, looking at the sky, enjoying my freedom. So, that makes us think, what exactly is happiness? And one of the answers to that is, living a simple life driven by values is happiness. Our education system has made us so money-minded. And it's not successful people that are happy, it's the happy people who are successful. So I think I've talked a lot about happiness, and you might be feeling a little tired. Let's do a small trick to the brain and become more alert. It's a very simple trick, and you can try it anytime. If you are ever tired, you might notice, or if you're bored, if you're tired, we tend to close our eyelids. When we are alert, our eyelids open. So this is because we have neurons in our brain that, depending on our level of alertness, will keep our eyes open and shut. When we are tired, the eyelids close and even the chin moves down. So all we have to do is just look up the ceiling for 10 to 15 seconds. And that would trigger some areas of the brain that are associated with wakefulness. It's a very, very simple trick. If you ever feel bored or tired, just put the chin up and look up. Looking up also changes the mood. When we are unhappy, sad, we put our face down. It's a droopy face. Even our body posture is slightly closed. When we are happy, we open up a little more, and look straight or keep the chin up. There are a lot of meditation exercises where you keep the chin up a little bit. That changes your own disposition, how your eyes are focused on certain things when you close your eyes for meditation. Since I'm a designer, I want to talk about, the user experience of the phone that we have every day. People, when people look at phone, they put the chin down and look at the phones. That also makes them unhappy. It also creates sadness, boredom, even loss of focus. If you have to focus, keep your chin up. Even the back should be straight when you sit. You would have more focus, and all that focus, awareness contribute to happiness. If you work on a computer, keep your computer at the eye level so that you don't have to put your chin down. So if you have done this exercise, let's come back to body, mind, and consciousness. We know the brain is the coordinating center of sensations. The mind is the faculty of consciousness and thought. And then there is something called awareness of the world around. But mind is the most important thing to look at when we talk about happiness. And somebody has talked about mind being like a drunken monkey bitten by a scorpion, and it's very, very difficult to control the mind. There is, in the Eastern philosophy, body has 5 elements. It's made of chemicals. Mind is also a product of matter. Body is matter, mind comes from matter. And scientists have called it as an epiphenomena. It's like when you have a candle, you light a candle and it produces light and heat. In the Eastern philosophy, mind is also known as a subtle body. So it is, at the end of the day, material body. Consciousness, on the other hand, in very, very simple terms, is like the electricity that goes through many gadgets. There are different gadgets, they look different, they perform differently, but the common thread in all of them is electricity. So a bulb would light, a heater would heat, a fan would cool, move. So every gadget becomes alive because of that consciousness. Or every body, every animal, everybody has this consciousness. It has different levels of consciousness though, but the most essential thing to know is that this consciousness connects us all. Every one of us is connected by the bedrock of consciousness. And if we can understand this, there will be more harmony in the world. And with more harmony comes happiness for everybody. So for brain to experience happiness, all sensory stimuli need to be optimal proportions and reasonably integrated, which is when the mind will also be in focus. So next question you might ask is, where does happiness live? And there is a very interesting story of a musk deer. And probably, you won't use the musk perfume after hearing this story, the natural musk perfume, but a lot of deers are killed for this. So, human condition is like the musk deer, who has a small pouch under the tail. And during their season, the deer keeps looking for the source of this fragrance, and it wanders around the entire jungle looking for the source of this fragrance. but that source is within him, very close to him. Likewise, happiness is also very close to us. It's not far away. There was a wise man who walked on the streets of Jerusalem who said, lay treasures in your heart where thieves cannot break and steal. It was the Sermon on the Mount. And there are treasures in all of us. Once we have access to it, life is easy and joyful. So problems will come out, but we'll be able to handle it. So problems will happen in our life. We'll have the capacity to manage them if we understand that happiness lies within. So is there a concept of permanent happiness, or happiness is transient, temporary, transitionary in nature? So the reason the Eastern philosophy gives for this is the world is made of objects, emotions, and thoughts from which we derive pleasure. And this is constantly changing. The world is constantly moving. If you look at it, planets are moving, galaxies are moving, Earth is moving, sun is moving, the atoms are moving, everything is constantly moving. Even the mind is constantly changing. Our body is also changing. So nothing is constant in the world. So trying to find permanent happiness within these changing factors is also cause of unhappiness when everything is moving. So, one yogi has actually given the analogy of a tornado. When everything is moving, the stillness is in the eye of the storm, in the center. So if we can center ourselves, we can find calm and peace, and that is the source of happiness. The other concept is permanent happiness can only be found from something that is permanent, which means we can find permanent infinite happiness from the infinite source of happiness, which is consciousness, or bliss consciousness. So we feel success is the end all and be all of life. We work like we are in the rat race for success. And when we succeed, the tension continues because we have to sustain the success rate of this. If we fail, there is pain of the failure. But in both cases of success and failure, tension and stress is very common. So how to avoid bad times in life? And I want to talk about one study that was done by California Institute of Clinical Psychology. And it was about this brilliant engineer manager in California who studied in some best universities, who had a wonderful wife, children, a big house. He was at a senior position in a large company. And the economy somehow tanked in 2008, 2009. And he lost his job. And he tried finding a job. He wanted to find a job at his level. He could not get it. So he committed suicide. And he shot his wife and children and then shot himself. So researchers tried to study what went wrong. And they met this guy's friends and family. And what they found is that this person was programmed for success. He was a topper in his career, in life. He was always number one, but he was not trained for handling failures. So the best success habit, according to me, is getting trained in handling failures. And this is something that I want to request through this presentation to all the parents, to not program your child to be successful, but teach them how to handle failures. Learning high-level science, maths would help them get a job, but knowledge about life will help them face every problem in their life. Teach them how money works instead of teaching them to work for money. So, everything we do, is to become complete. We think we are not complete, and everything we move is moving around us, but we seek stillness. And I feel this is the reason why we are unhappy, and something that we have concluded through the discussion. Another reason why we are unhappy is also in psychology, there is a term called negativity bias. And we process negative experiences 9 times more strongly than positive experience. Maybe because cortisol, a negative stress hormone, stays a little longer. Or the other reason might be recategorization, as this neuroscience professor Lisa Fieldman writes in her book How Emotions Are Made. And she talks about recategorization as a tool for of the emotion. And she says, there are 2 ways to categorize your feelings. There's a positive way and there's a negative way. For example, if you look at athletes, Olympic athletes, they are under tremendous stress before they have to run or do anything athletic. But if you ask them before the meet, even after the meet, how are you feeling? They'll mostly say that they are excited. They will never say they are nervous. So that is recategorization, just converting your emotions to something positive. Instead of saying I am doomed, if you just say I'm excited and ready to go, face the challenge and fix things, it will change your perspective. It will shift the focus from the primal nature of the brain to the prefrontal cortex. So let us do a small test. Suppose, after going through this presentation, I say, I'm not going to say another word for the next 30 minutes. Are you still going to be here? Will you still wait for me? And, you might stay on for a few minutes. You may wait to really know what the end outcome is for this exercise. But what might irritate you is this concept of waiting. You might look around, look at the wall, the lights, maybe open your, switch on your phone, look at the phone, messages, email. But if you look at it, this waiting is kind of a meditation. Just waiting can impact deep sense of creativity inside us. Because waiting is the junction where on one side you have frustration, anger, and all the negativity. But on the other side, you can actually find quietness and bring out creativity in you. It's a very, very simple exercise, just waiting for something to happen. And, philosophically speaking, everything in this world is all about waiting. We wait for the love to find us. We wait for a career to take off. We even wait for exhaling. We wait for a sign. And then, we wait for somebody we love. We wait for Uber. We wait for doctor's appointment. We wait for a child to come home. We wait for something better to come in our life. We wait for our prayers to be answered. So the whole world is basically a waiting room. It's waiting that causes or creates silence within us. So if you shake hands with the process of waiting, we are opening the door to infinity. We talked about something complete, something infinite, something bigger than us. How do we associate with that? This could be one of the ways. We keep thinking about what's next, and then that is it, that silence is the answer. And when we experience that silence, we'll also experience relaxation. And that is loosening up of the mind. So mind is not all that chatty. Mind is not like, monkey stung by a scorpion. We just need to know how to loosen it up and tame the mind. By being friendly with the mind, by chatting with the mind, we can be friends with the mind. And that is what meditation is. And that leads to happiness. Our thoughts, it's all about the thoughts. It's, thoughts create life, but life does not create thoughts. So, we'll do a small exercise to illustrate this. If you can close your eyes and imagine the fragrance of jasmine or your favorite flower. So you are activating your sense of smell. Or now think of the aroma of coffee. So your sense of smell is activated. Now let's activate the sense of visual cognition. Imagine a wonderful sunrise in front of you with your eyes closed. Feel all the colors. Feel the chirping of the birds. So you're activating your sense of hearing. Now think about your favorite dish. And that favorite dish is in front of you. So you're activating your salivary glands, your sense of taste. So feel you are on the sea beach or on the top of the mountain with the breeze. So feel that breeze touching your skin. So you could feel everything just by closing the eyes and thinking about all these things. This is the capacity of the mind. You can open your eyes now. What you were doing was basically tapping into your memory, and the memory unfolded in front of you. What you repeatedly think, feel, imagine becomes your reality. And that is what positive psychology is all about. So constantly training our mind to think in a certain way, to feel in a certain way, and imagine in a certain way. There are a lot of books about positive psychology. So I won't get into much details, or maybe it's a conversation for another day. Every object around us was one day a thought. As a designer, I can really understand this because every idea starts with a thought. Everything that we see around us, every object that we see around us was an idea in somebody else's mind, and now it's a reality. So everything is a product of thought, and thought becomes words, and feelings becomes actions. And that is how we create our own reality. So likewise, if we want happiness, we have to just create our own reality. So there is, before we get into another complex topic about happiness, there's a small story I want to talk about. It's a tired traveler who decided to sleep under a wish-fulfilling tree. So whatever you think happens if you sleep under that tree. So he was very tired. He thought, if I had a couch to lie down, that would be great. So that couch appeared. Then he desired food, and food came. He desired drinks, drinks came. He felt ache in his hands, feet. So he wanted servants to come and massage him. Servants came. And when all this was happening, he started getting worried. He felt that, whatever he's imagining is appearing, and he's enjoying this. And he wanted this experience to last forever. But then the fear in him said, what if a tiger comes and kills me? And immediately a tiger came and killed this person. So if the analogy of the story is that the tree is our mind, whatever we wish, we get it through positive psychology, training the mind. it will manifest as a living reality. And we need to take charge of this mind. And this is the miracle of positive thinking. So what you think repeatedly will manifest in your life. What you feel repeatedly, you will experience and attract in your life. What you imagine repeatedly will create in your life. I'll just talk about 3 positive psychology tips at a high level. If you just think positive in your mind, positive language, anytime we have to use a language, we have thoughts, if we can focus on those thoughts and try to convert them into positive thoughts, even negative thoughts, we can convert them into positive thoughts. For example, if you're nervous about something, some event that we have to participate in, just say, I'm not nervous, I'm just excited. And life does not create thoughts. Thoughts create life. We are just an embodied mind. We live in this mind. Our body lives in this mind. And whatever you give energy to, you will attract in your life. And then there was an interesting quote that I found somewhere, and I noted it down, and it said, your life is only 10% what happens to you. The rest 90% is how you react to what happens to you. So, we talked about the frontal cortex and, the primal part of our brain and, the amygdala. So how do we change our focus to the prefrontal cortex? That is the crux of this whole effort of positive thinking, becoming happy. So there is a small exercise that positive psychologists talk about. For any incident that happens, any unpleasant incident, ask yourself these few questions before responding. How do I feel about this in a day, a week, month, a year, or 5 years? For example, I'll give an example about wife. If you have unpleasant conversation with your wife, how do I feel about this in a day? Probably the answer is not good. But maybe she started the fight first. A week later, I can't believe we haven't made up yet. Maybe after a month since the fight, things have never been the same. Maybe I shouldn't have said what I said. Maybe after a year, the answer would be, I can't believe we are breaking up. And maybe 5 years later, you might think, I wish I could have that day back. So by giving ourselves a glimpse into the future, we give ourselves a second chance at the present. So, a lot of people talk about living in the present. This is a technique to still live in the present, but also create a glimpse of the future so that you can make your present a much better experience. There is another exercise to focus our attention to the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And if you're working in a job and somebody gives you negative feedback and you are tempted to say something that might hurt that person, or it's an emotional feedback and you might likely to regret later. So just say this, thanks for sharing this, please give me a day or two to think it over. So a response like this is helpful because your first reaction is generally an emotional reaction. If you give some time, your amygdala will calm down and you'll start thinking with the other more reasoning parts of your brain. So there is a small story to illustrate this fact about the mind. There was this museum, and the stairs were made of marble, and one of the greatest sculpture in that museum. The best sculpture of the museum was also a marble sculpture. So the stairs that had stones made of marble were talking to each other. And they said, we are unhappy because people trample on us, people walk on us. We take all people's shoes, dirt. But the statue, which is also made from the same stone that we were created, is loved by everybody who visits this museum. It has a very high price. It's protected. People take pictures, people sketch. It's considered one of the best statues. So the statue was hearing this conversation, and then the statue said, when the sculptor was cutting the rock, you guys broke down. You threw up lot of dust tantrums, but I took blow after blow, and I was chiseled in many days. So if you can take blows of life positively, learn from them, and chisel yourself, then you can reach the fulfillment of your life. If you break down, keep complaining, have bitterness, negativity, jealousy, then you'll go into a negative state of mind and become steps. So the answer that the Eastern philosophy talks about is raising yourself by yourself, not demeaning yourself by yourself. You are the greatest friend and you are the greatest enemy of yourself. So, there is another exercise that you can, whenever you drink water, you can think about this small incident. If you hold this a glass of water and keep it for some time, holding it, and try to judge the weight of the glass of water. And the longer you hold, the weight would keep increasing. So the absolute weight of the water does not really matter. It all depends on how long you hold on to it. So likewise, if there are stress and worries in your life, see them as holding the glass of water. The more you hold it, the more fatigued you would be, the more weight it would have on you. So just put the glass down. And it is the same with the mothers. If you look at mothers, they may be having a frail body, but when they hold their child close to their bosom, and if you ever ask them if the child is heavy, they will walk many miles. In India, mothers walk many miles, in villages when they go to the fields. And I've seen those mothers, and if you ever ask them, don't you feel the weight of your child? And they'll say, my child weighs as light as a flower. So when you have love, then all the stress of life feels like flowers. So, we talked about good times, bad times, happiness, unhappiness. There is another exercise that you can perform, which is basically looking at our attributes during the good times. Good times bring happiness, love, success, confidence. Our relationships become harmonious. Our health is good. Bad times, we turn to God, prayers, we turn to our faith. We become more disciplined. We start having more humility in life. We make more efforts to be successful when we have bad times. We give our best and we become more brave in the bad times. So what we found is, good times actually lead to laziness, indiscipline. We become more pampered. We have more ego. We could become more arrogant. We could take things for granted. We become more casual. So what if we conclude that good times bring the worst out of us and bad times bring the best out of us? And in good times, if we do what we do in bad times can be avoided. Just think about it. As you sleep today, what you do in your good times and what you do in the bad times. If you do the same thing that you do in your bad times, in your good times, make that list and try to incorporate it in your life will be very different. There is another concept in yoga about inner and outer happiness. And that is what mindfulness is all about. I can give a very practical example, and you can do it tomorrow when you wake up and you have a bath. Stand in front of your mirror and observe the expression on your face and force yourself to smile. Think of a funny joke, or just bring an artificial expression of smiling or laughing on your face. When you are actually happy, our brain activates the facial muscles and bring about smiling or laughing expression. So what we are doing is reversing this. So because it works both ways. When you change the expression deliberately, the message goes to the brain that the facial expressions are in smile mode, and brain links it to the pleasure or happiness center. And happiness is generated and again transmitted to the facial muscles. So you then end up smiling genuinely. So a small thing, if you are in a bad mood, just do it for a couple of minutes. It will completely change your mood. So, we talked about the formula for happiness, and I'm still trying to figure out the formula for happiness, but I feel, in a very, very simple words, the formula for happiness is to improve your awareness. If you allow awareness to flow unobstructed in the system, it improves health of body and mind. And finding your way to the source of your being is the path to happiness. Learning to manage yourself, and it all starts with learning to manage yourself, the self-management. So, final thoughts, before we conclude, I'll leave you with 4 thoughts to ponder. We need both meaning and purpose in life to be happy. Just find yours. Number 2, build an abundance mindset. Life is not a zero-sum game. And thirdly, humans have been evolving. We have evolved to this level. Evolution is our nature. We evolve from state of anger, greed, fear, hypocrisy, conceit, our basal nature, to the blissful nature, which is the final destination. And lastly, the core of all human beings is one. When that is understood, then the little smile on everybody's face, every little face that smiles, is the source of happiness. So with that, and I want to open for questions and any discussions or anybody wants to contribute to what I said.
Do we just speak?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Oh, what you said about living for only 2 days of the week is something that I learned a long time ago. I'm in my 70s and I was in high school, and my French teacher said the same thing. She heard us talking about, how we were looking forward to the weekend. And she said, well, if you just live on the weekends, you're living only 2/7 of your life. And I thought that was so wise at that moment. And I still think that it is. And if we can enjoy what we do every day, then we can enjoy 7/7 of our life. But as you say, 52 or 53% of people are not happy in their jobs, then and they're burnt out, then we're obviously not doing a good job of being happy in our work.
Yeah, so true. In fact, we spend more time at work than with our family and friends. So majority of our life's time is spent in our career. And if we can't make that a happy experience, then it ends up with a lot of mental and physical problems.
Mhm. Thank you.
Barbara, you want to say something?
There are a lot of hands up.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if you can see them, Himanshu, but Satemkia had one up, and then she just put it down. But then I don't know if she still wanted to say something, but then you have a line of hands.
Yeah.
So may I say something or?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, because you were talking about job that is not happy. So I have been in one company for 9 years and I was really desperate, not because I was bad what I did, but because I didn't know what I want. And that was the key of that. So so I was struggle with that and then figure out what I really want. So as I said on the beginning, in the comments in the chat, that I think it's just my opinion that I think when we are, you know what we need, I think that we start to be happy, my view. But I think that's not only that, right? Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Just figuring out your priorities. And if, we have to figure out what that priority is and how do we reach there. And we try to, focus on the end goal, happiness, but we forget that in order to reach the end goal, we have to also focus on the journey, and the journey is the happiness. So either making our environment around us joyful, and if that is not possible, then finding another place where we can actually practice that happiness is the answer.
And then Hans is next.
Yes, hello. I'm Hans. And yeah, so I wanted to comment on the earlier statement of everything we do is for happiness. And yeah, my comment is, I'm not certain that that's true, or at least I can say I'm not certain it's true for everybody, and that it's possible that different people might experience life in different ways. In fact, I might personally be an exception to that assertion. And I'll explain what I mean through an analogy. Suppose there's two people, persons A and B, and person A says that let's say they're university students, and let's say person A says the purpose of that my purpose in education is to get a high GPA, high grades, high grade point average. Well, that's fine. But person B might say, well, my purpose of education is to get educated. And the GPA is simply an indicator of whether I'm accomplishing that or not. In other words, it's just a piece of data that indicates whether I'm succeeding what is the main goal. In fact, and it's useful data. And in fact, a low GPA and a high GPA are equally useful as data, because the high GPA confirms that we're making progress. The low GPA alerts us to the fact that we might need to improve something. So the analogy that I'm making is to, let's say, life in general. So person A, again, might say, well, in life, my purpose is to be happy. And person B might say, well, my purpose is to have a life well lived. And happiness is just, let's say, an indicator. It's just a piece of data. It's useful data because it tells us whether I'm accomplishing that or not. And unhappiness is also useful data. If I happen to feel happiness or unhappiness, it's equally useful data because it gives me the indicator. It's the piece of data that gives me the indicator of whether I'm accomplishing what is my true goal, which is to have a life well lived, which of course, could mean different things for different people. So my point is that, well, my view of how I approach life is more like person B. And so I take happiness as simply an indicator, and unhappiness as well, useful indicators about, how I'm doing. And so I just wanted to make this comment because, you know, I think that I might be experiencing something a little bit different from what I think you were saying. And I want to make sure that we have room for, you know, maybe a variety of different ways that different people experience life. I just wanted to mention that. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think it's a very valid point. There are multiple ways in which you can approach this, difference in this way of thinking. One is, when people say, they are working towards a GPA, towards the next goal, you ask yourself a bunch of questions. Why are you doing it? What would it get you? And keep probing a little more, deeper, deeper, deeper. And actually it will reach the answer which is closer to happiness. Because then you'll know, if you are doing something for, say, just to live a better life, or life better lived, that's just another way of referencing happiness, because happiness is also aimed, what we want to achieve is also to live a better life, and that life, and that the answer or the output of that is happiness.
Yeah, well, I guess I just wanted to say that I'm not sure that that assertion is true for all people. Maybe somehow you can be sure, but I haven't checked. I haven't confirmed that. I don't know if I can, say for sure. This is what I know to be true of all people. I can only speak for myself. So I think I would be going out on a limb to say, this is also true for other people.
Somebody actually joked one day, when I was talking about this, they said, even when we itch, that itch is also for happiness, because we feel happy when we itch. So every action that we perform is for that end result that gives us some pleasure or happiness.
Right. So,
but what I really wanted to steer the talk towards is not just pleasure or happiness, but there is something much higher that we can all aspire for. That is blissful state, which is state of happiness at all times, or state of equanimity, state of calm. And that calm can give us that happiness. So that blissfulness is a different kind of state that allows us to be a better human being, have a better mind, and to perform better in this world.
Right. Well, my final point, I think, is that I just want to make sure that if we say that XYZ is true about all people, that we don't disenfranchise people who, in their experience of their own life, are doing something different from that.
Sure. Sure.
Thank you.
Next question.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the goal is happiness, or if that is merely a side effect of the things that give us a life well lived. I ran into something rather curious today while following a link that Garth had in the Discord server under the 5 intentions, and it was a brief note in side notes that people who engage in mindfulness meditation may not be actively repairing social problems that they should be attending to. The point that the researchers were making was that if the only goal of mindfulness meditation is to reduce feelings of guilt and unhappiness by focusing on breath or something like this, then we're not focusing on ways that we can repair our relationships with others. And this bears some resonance for me. I know that when I was living on the street, I discovered that the people in this world who are most generous are the people who have the least to give. They'll give you everything they have without questioning. Whereas, you know, when I was living in the middle class, I'd hear people wondering, well, if I give this person money, are they going to go buy alcohol with it? Or are they going to buy drugs with it? Or this, that, or the other thing? And that's not really my concern. So I know that for me, being of use to others, being able to help them with their problems helps me with mine. Is something that I learned in 12-step programs, that when you do something for someone else, you're giving yourself a chance to recover as well. And that's quite important to me. And I think that happiness occurs as a side effect. But it's not my goal. My goal is to help others. My goal is to maintain an attitude that people around me feel inspired by me and feel encouraged by me. Now, I don't know what it is that I do or that I say that causes people to feel like this, but I know that it's there, that it's been there for a very long time. So it's important for me to do whatever I can to maintain my own spirit so that that continues. And happiness occurs as a side effect of that. And that's it. That's all I needed to say.
Yeah. Very valid point. You know, there are multiple ways of expressing and reaching and pursuing happiness. And no one way is right and better than the other, you know, because it's like, you know, there are a lot of rivers coming to the ocean. No one river is the same, but the end goal is happiness. And happiness is a much larger term, just to make things easy. But we are seeking fulfillment in one way or the other. And by doing service, all we are getting is that fulfillment. And if we are not seeking anything, that's selfless service. And for some people, selfless service is the way to find inner joy. So it is a very valid point.
That's it, exactly. Thank you.
This guy on the TV, I can't see it. He has unusually short arms. This guy, 22?
22 is unusually short arms.
Yeah.
Okay, who's next?
I think that's me, but there was a Ron Rubin with his microphone on. Perhaps. Yeah, okay, terrific. Yeah, look, thanks, Himanshu. That was interesting. I don't know where to start. Let's start with this. You introduced the idea, or you kept referencing Eastern philosophies. It was about 10 years ago, I was introduced to an Eastern philosophy called Advaita. Advaita is non-duality. And I read about it and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I couldn't find any relevance to day-to-day life. And I spent a lot of time in delving in quantum mechanics and relativity theory. And then about 3 years ago, I had a meltdown. It was a funny afternoon. I remember it very clearly. I felt a complete realignment of the way I looked at the world, and it's very profound. And it's when I could talk about non-duality, for those that perhaps are not so familiar, it's the notion that there aren't necessarily opposites, and that fits very nicely with some of the quandaries in quantum mechanics and relativity theory. So, for example, there is under non-duality no cold. It is simply degrees of heat, as one example. In part of that spectrum of that, I look today and say, there is no such thing as happiness. Let me repeat, there is no such thing as happiness. It is my natural state. It is simply the absence of thinking. Now, I've had a very rigorous professional career in engineering, economics, science. So I'm like to think of myself as a rational person. But I've now come to the point in saying, yeah, but what is happening? What is really happening is that I put all of that thinking between me and reality. And after all, if you go by some of the authors like Daniel Kahneman in Thinking Fast and Slow, or my favorite, Ian McGilchrist in The Master and the Emissary, and he's recently produced a even larger tome of 1,500 pages, in fact, which I have to work through, is that most, when I say most, some say 95%, some say even 100%, but the majority all agree that the processing that we do in our mind is largely subconscious without our awareness. And if you go by Kahneman's argument of system 1, system 2, system 1 is your subconscious processing. We're not aware of what goes on in there. And it's only that system 2, only that little bit of our little bit of our processing that we become aware of. And when you think like that, you start to develop a totally different inverse attitude to the world. It's like, you know, we are traditionally in the West conditioned to thinking that we come into the world and we are in the world. And the inverse of that is the world is in us. We come out of the world. This is Advaita. Now, you could say, well, look, this fellow here is being radicalized. But by golly, it is extremely, extremely liberating once you get that. And so when you talk about the prefrontal cortex, here's a cue. You know, in the Bible, you have in Genesis the notion of Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge and how they were in paradise unto that moment. Isn't that exactly what I'm describing to you? That the tree of knowledge, that sense of that conscious awareness is what's actually keeping us out of paradise. That if we just relaxed and pull out of this cognitive delusion that we have, that everything that we think is actually not, it's only a tiny, tiny, tiny part of our processing. That
Here's
all
my
of
guy
that
with the short
process
arms.
goes on subconsciously. Ron, you got your mic on, mate. So, you know, this is I actually was next to speak, and I thought, look, let me not disrupt this conversation, because this is disruptive. It's you know what Michel Foucault, a French philosopher, calls an episteme. I'm calling this an episteme, a different way of relating to the world. It doesn't mean you have to be in la la land. It doesn't mean you have to lose your cognitive. It doesn't mean anything. It just means relaxing, allowing the world to happen. And I think you get a very different relationship with the world. And then you can say, like I'm saying, and I'm hogging the time, and I didn't mean to make a lecture out of this, but you know, it just get to a point and you say, look, the world happens. And I can say, look, there is no such thing as happiness. But of course, the majority of people will disagree with me. And I watched a TED talk with this lady, a doctor, let me conclude with that, a doctor in psychology. And she talked about, she and her team had discovered 21 forms of happiness. And in that TED talk, the audience got up and gave her a resounding clap, and I folded my arms and I thought, no, lady, I'm sorry. These are 21 forms of fear. And that is what is happening. If you get it, that what is really happening to keep us from a state of truly declaring happiness is to say, what is the fear? What am I dealing with? A little bit more honesty with yourself. And then you enter this natural state. And yes, you can label it happiness, but it's also my natural state. So I don't have to talk about happiness anymore. But if I was in the common parlance, in the vernacular, yes, I have to talk about happiness because no one understands me. They give me a funny look. Anyway, look, it's a different perspective, Himanshu. I have spent a lot of time in India. Perhaps I've spent too much time in India. But anyway, I just feel that, look, there is a different way, and it's to recognize that cognitive is not you. It is, there is much more to you, and you know, let the world happen. Anyway, that's my perspective.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. You know, I wanted to touch upon the Advaita in this talk, but you know, within that short period of time, I felt, you know, I may not do enough justice to that philosophy, so I actually edited that part out. But you know, maybe this could be a talk for another day where I can actually talk about the duality and non-duality. But the Buddhist philosophy talks about emptiness, everything, on the same hand, the yoga philosophy talks about completeness, and both are the same. So I would love to talk about the different states of our being and how the experiences in those three states of our being are. But before I move to the next person, I wanted to talk about a funny joke about this Advaita philosophy to ponder. There was this disciple who learned the philosophy, and he was asked by his guru to see supreme reality in everybody. So then he walks on the road and he started supreme reality in every person, every animal, every bird, which is the consciousness that he was experiencing. So there was this elephant that was coming on the road in front of him. The person on that elephant asked him to move away, but he didn't move. He felt the supreme reality is in the elephant as well. So why should I move? The supreme reality exists within me and also in that elephant. So there is no point of moving away. So he stood his ground. So the elephant picked him up and threw him away. He got injured. So he came back to his guru and said, you asked me to look at supreme reality in everybody. I did that, but I got injured. So the guru said, yes, I did that, and it was correct. But you did not see the supreme reality in the person sitting on the elephant who asked you to move away. So sometimes in life, you have to be practical also in this world. So before you experience that supreme reality, you have to live in the ways of the world. But yes, through, there is this theoretical knowledge, and then there is an experiential knowledge. The Indian philosophy is more experiential. To find the truth, you have to experience the truth. However many books we read, it's very difficult to explain it. It is only through experience that we can really understand the universality and the fact that everything is one. The consciousness pervades in every being, every atom, every molecule, everything in this cosmos, everything is one. That whole experience comes only through turning the senses inwards. The more senses are outwards, they will look at objects, and everything is an object of the experience. So once we turn inwards, everything dissolves into that infinite experience or reality.
Yeah, look, it's certainly true, Himanshu, what you say. You have to, I think you implied you have to be, or maybe I'm taking it further than what you said. You have to connect with the world, and your conversation as you had it is one that fits very nicely in the Western mindset. To talk like I've done will get eyes rolling. Most people feel uncomfortable about it. And as I said, I had a meltdown when I realized that I was looking at the world wrongly. That inverse, and that conversation I feel is much more powerful. And what's more, in particular, and I'll conclude with this statement, if you continue to hold the Western view of happiness, as you described, as your introduction was, you are actually disempowering yourself you're discouraging inquiry. You are not exploring what is actually inhibiting my natural state. What is it that I'm feeling that is making me so-called unhappy? And my exploration is it's always some fear, always some story, which is always fake. Anyway, let me conclude with that. But yeah, thank you.
Great. So I'm going to both agree and disagree with Remco, and say that I agree that sort of observing and being an observer of the world is a good thing. And there I'll side with the Stoics, who were great sort of Western philosophy, but said to separate what's in your control from what's out of your control. and only focus your happiness on the things that you can control. In other words, just be an observer for the things that are out of your control and don't worry about them and don't allow them to affect your happiness. And you talked about a recipe for happiness, Himanshu. I think that's a pretty good recipe for happiness. That's made me much happier since I started following it. And then the other thing that I'll mention is I think Buddhism was brought up, and I talked with a Buddhist monk about what non-attachment was, and essentially the way that I was able to distill it and have it make sense for me was to simply not be disappointed no matter what happens, which is again agreeing with half of what Remco said, maybe not the half of not having happiness, but agreeing with the sort of be an observer of the world and be a enjoying the little things in life. And I think if we can not be attached to outcomes and focus more on doing what we think is right, which is my own paper on what I think self-worth should be derived from, which you talked, Himanshu, a lot about the way the Western world derives self-worth, and happiness is a lot of material stuff. And I don't think that's the right way to derive self-worth or happiness either. Really, we should be focused on doing our best to do what we think is right. And if we do that, we should be happy with where we land. And if we just avoid disappointment no matter what happens and keep trying our best to do what we think is right, then I find that keeps me happy and trying to help add value to other people's lives. And similar to Satemkia, like I find a lot of joy in trying to help other people. And that's kind of my primary goal, is to try to add value to other people's lives and find mutually beneficial relationships where we can add value to each other's lives. So, and that's part of why I started the Freethinker Institute in the first place. And Hans, by the way, your hand is still up. I don't know if you intended it to be.
Okay, looks like there are no more questions. So Garrett, maybe we can conclude, but you're welcome to reach out to me for any questions or go to the Discord community and chat there.
And yeah, Constance mentioned the Serenity Prayer. Constance, it was funny. I always loved the Serenity Prayer, and then when I learned about Stoicism, I realized the Serenity Prayer is ancient Stoic wisdom repackaged by Niebuhr, who was the guy that came up with the Serenity Prayer, in quite frankly much pithier and more beautiful language. But it really is ancient Stoic wisdom, beautifully put. So thanks, Himanshu, so much for talking and for leading the discussion. And thanks everybody for your great contributions. I'll post one last time the chat, the link to the online community, and would love for people to join that so that we can communicate between this week and next week's session. I don't remember what next week's session is right now, but we have another one every week. So I hope to see you all next Tuesday night. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your evening. And thanks everyone for joining and participating, and sorry for the distractions. We get trolls every once in a while and we boot them as quick as we can, and I'll try to make sure that no one has screen share access in the future. All right, thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.